Welcome back to the National Post Politics Bureau, where I'm here with Jordan Gowling, actually a brand new reporter at the National Post Politics Bureau. And today we are talking about a busy week for Mark Carney. He was in Davos on Tuesday. That's the home of the World Economic Forum annual conference, home of the global elites. And Carney gave a speech that, Jordan, I think this is being received pretty well in some circles, maybe not in other circles, like the Oval Office, maybe not the best reaction, but how in general has his speech been received?
I think in general it's been received quite well, particularly from different leaders around the world. I'm thinking about Mexico, Finland, other sort of middle power allies, because really that was the theme of Mark Carney's speech this week, was about sort of a rallying cry for middle powers, sort of naming the moment in a sense that things have changed globally, and it's time to start calling out so-called hegemons.
Yes, and one of those hegemons had an angry tweet on Thursday night. Do we think this was related to the Davos speech? Because Trump was saying Mark Carney's no longer invited to his Gaza Board of Peace. We had just found out there was an invitation last week. There was some talk from Trump officials about Mark Carney's speech, but I don't think Trump ever directly addressed it. Do we feel like maybe we've raised the ire of the U.S. with this?
I think a little bit. I think members of his administration, Lutnick, for example, Scott Bessent, these are key players in the White House, have definitely shown some disdain for Carney's comments recently. Trump as well, in his speech, sort of acknowledged that Carney should be more grateful, for example.
That's right, yeah.
So they've definitely listened to the speech, and I definitely think the lack of invitation, perhaps, to the Board of Peace was a reaction to Carney's comments earlier this week.
But we save $1 billion. That was the fee for the Gaza Board of Peace, so we get to spend that money now. Pierre Poilievre, actually, Thursday night, this was Carney's Tuesday speech. We didn't get a response from Poilievre until Thursday night. What did he have to say about Carney's speech?
Well, he did acknowledge that it was a good speech. He called it well-crafted.
Yeah.
So
I saw CBC put that in the headline,
yeah.
which I'm sure he didn't love.
So he did acknowledge that I think the general tenor of Carney's words were correct. I think where Poilievre says it's lacking is that I've heard a lot of lofty words from you, not a lot of action. And he sort of laid into Carney, particularly on the domestic front, which I think is going to be more of a theme going into next year when the House this year when the House returns, that, okay, you've gone on the world stage, you've said these lofty things, but where is the action on this?
Yeah, and that could be a good line of attack because, I mean, a lot of Carney's initiatives are long timeline ventures. Like we have major projects. Those take years. So he may be vulnerable on that. Carney gave a second speech this week, and this was at the Liberal Cabinet Retreat. They're calling it something else, something like the Cabinet Planning Forum, which is very Mark Carney. We will continue to call it a Cabinet Retreat in this video. That speech, though, a bit more of a mixed reaction to that one, I think.
Yeah, he talked a lot about Canadian sovereignty, Canadian values in particular. He obviously responded to Trump's response to his speech, saying Canada is Canadians are Canadian because of Canada. Yeah. But he also drew the ire of Quebec sovereigntists, particularly in his comments surrounding the Plains of Abraham and what some sovereigntists would call British conquest over New France. Yeah. He called it a partnership, but Parti Québécois leader Plamondon and the Bloc Québécois say they view history of that quite differently. So he may be in a bit of trouble in Quebec right now over those comments.
This is one of those moments where we start to wonder, with all this talk from Carney, we're seeing Trump being brought into the conversation again, mostly because Trump is injecting himself into the conversation. And then we had this, this was a speech by Carney talking about Canadian values. I do wonder if this could be the early signs that we're heading towards an election in 2026. And it's nearly been a year since it's nearly 1 year since Mark Carney was elected. Most minority parliaments last about 2 years. I think probably if you're the Liberal Party, either way you're preparing for an election, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And particularly when you look at the Trump challenge going into this year, it's not going away. You have Kuzma review coming up in the summertime. Yeah. You may have reason to go to the electorate before that and say, hey, I need a majority mandate before
that's the Doug Ford way.
Before negotiating with Trump. So that's absolutely a possibility. And when you look at Poilievre's personal poll numbers, they're not great. So they could definitely put the Conservatives on their back foot and call an early election.
The paradox of the Conservative Party right now is they're neck and neck with the Liberals on the national polls, but Poilievre does have some favorable issues. I think that's all we've got time for. Jordan, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.